Sinara had not planned on touching the king. No sane person would. But sanity had left the room the moment King Caedmon Voss collapsed in the middle of his own throne hall. And no one, not the 3 royal healers kneeling over him, not the 40 nobles pressed against the walls in frozen horror, not the beta commander barking orders that no one could follow, none of them could stop what was happening to him. The blackening had started at his fingertips. Sinara had seen it from across the hall, thin dark lines crawling beneath his skin like roots burrowing through soil, spreading up his wrists, past his forearms, threading toward his chest. His veins were turning visible and wrong, bruised dark and raised, as though something inside him was dying and wanted everyone to see. The healers poured tinctures down his throat. They pressed heated stones to his chest. They chanted words Sinara did not recognize and could not have repeated. Nothing worked. The blackening kept climbing. She should not have been there at all. She was nobody. A widow from a dead pack, employed in the lower palace dispensary because Ottilie, the head healer, had taken pity on her 2 winters ago and given her work grinding herbs for copper coins. She had come upstairs to deliver a salve for a minor lord's saddle rash. That was all. That was the entire reason she was standing in the throne hall of the most powerful alpha in the realm, watching him die on the floor in front of his own people. The sound he made changed something in her. A low, guttural noise that was not quite human, not quite wolf. It was the sound of something being torn apart from the inside. The sound of a bond breaking. Sinara's wolf stirred. It hit her like a fist to the chest. Her wolf, silent for 2 years, dormant since the night Girath died in her arms, suddenly surged forward with a force that buckled her knees. The sensation was so foreign, so sharp and immediate after years of nothing, that she gasped aloud. No one heard her. Every eye in the hall was fixed on the king, on the black veins now reaching his throat, on the healers backing away with pale faces because they had run out of things to try. Sinara moved before she decided to move. Her body carried her forward while her mind screamed at her to stop, to turn around, to remember that she was no one, and this was the Alpha King, and touching him uninvited was punishable by death. But her wolf was pulling, dragging her forward with a desperate, keening urgency she had never felt before, not even with Girath, not even at the end. She dropped to her knees beside him. A guard lunged for her, but the beta, a tall, scarred man whose name she did not yet know, threw out his arm and blocked him. Later, she would learn that the beta had acted on pure instinct, that he could not explain why he stopped the guard any more than she could explain what she did next. She put her hands on the king's chest. The reaction was instantaneous. Heat flooded through her palms, not from him, but from her, pouring out of some reservoir she did not know she carried. The black veins beneath her fingers stopped spreading. They shuddered, pulsed once, and began to retreat. Slowly at first, then faster, the darkness receded down his throat, back through his arms, draining from his skin like poison being drawn from a wound. Color returned to his face. His breathing, ragged and shallow a moment before, deepened into something steady. The terrible sound in his chest went quiet. The hall was silent. 40 nobles, 3 healers, a dozen guards, the beta commander, all of them staring at the nobody widow kneeling on the stone floor with her hands pressed flat against the king's heart. Caedmon's eyes opened. They were gray, pale, and sharp as winter glass, and they locked onto hers with an intensity that stopped her breath. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. His hand came up slowly, fingers closing around her wrist, not pulling her away, but holding her there, pressing her palm harder against his chest, like he was afraid she would let go. Then he blinked, seemed to register where he was and who was watching, and released her. Sinara pulled her hands back and scrambled to her feet. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. The beta stepped forward. "Take her to the east wing," he said to a guard. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. They were locked on Sonara's face with something she could not name, something between suspicion and desperate hope. "Am I under arrest?" Sonara asked. The beta did not answer. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "I did not mean to touch him. I do not know why I did that." The beta's gaze did not waver. "Neither do I," he replied. "That is exactly the problem." The guard took her arm and led her away. The last thing Sonara saw before the doors closed behind her was the king sitting up on the stone floor, staring after her with those pale gray eyes, one hand pressed to the place on his chest where her palms had been. 3 hours passed before anyone came for her. The room they had placed her in was not a cell, though it felt like one. A small sitting chamber in the east wing with a narrow window, a wooden chair, and a painting of a woman on horseback, whose expression suggested she, too, had once been trapped in a room against her will and had thoughts about it. Sonara sat with her hands in her lap and tried to understand what had happened. Her wolf was awake. After 2 years of silence, 2 years of reaching inward and finding nothing but a hollow ache where her other half used to be, the wolf was there again. Faint, unsteady, flickering like a candle in a draught, but present in a way she had not felt since the night everything fell apart. Jorath's death had broken something inside her. The healers called it bond severance, the trauma of losing a mated partner. Some wolves recovered in months. Some never recovered at all. Sonara had made peace with being the latter. She had buried her husband, buried her wolf, buried the life she had known as Luna of the Fen Hollow Pack, and started over with nothing. The door opened. The beta entered first, his scarred face unreadable. Behind him came a woman Sonara recognized immediately. Atelier, the head healer, small and silver-haired with hands that never stopped moving and eyes that missed nothing. "Oh, child," Atelier said when she saw Sonara's face. "What have you gotten yourself into?" "I do not know," Sonara replied. It was the truth. The beta closed the door and remained standing. He did not sit. He studied her the way a man might study a lock he could not pick. "My name is Torben," he said. "I serve as the king's second. I know who you are, my lord." "Then you also know the king has been ill." Sonara hesitated. Everyone in the palace knew, though no one spoke of it openly. The king's decline had been visible for months. The weight loss, the hollowed cheeks, the way he gripped the arms of his throne like a man holding himself upright through sheer will. Rumors moved through the lower halls in whispers. The king is cursed. The king is poisoned. The king is dying. "I have heard things," Sonara said carefully. Torben's jaw tightened. "What you heard is true. The king has been deteriorating for 7 months. Every healer in the realm has examined him. We have consulted herbalists, potion masters, wolf shamans, and 3 separate covens. Nothing has slowed the progression. Nothing has worked." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "Until this afternoon." The silence that followed pressed down on Sonara's shoulders like a physical thing. "What you did in the throne hall," Torben continued, "has not been accomplished by any healer, any remedy, or any magic we have tried in 7 months of searching. You put your hands on him, and the curse retreated." Sonara shook her head. "I did not do anything. I do not have any gift. I am a dispensary assistant. I grind herbs." "You are a Luna," Ottilia said quietly. Sonara flinched. She had not used that title in 2 years, had not spoken it, had not claimed it, had buried it along with everything else. "I was a Luna," she corrected, "of a pack that no longer exists." "Once a Luna, always a Luna," Ottilie replied. The wolf does not forget what it is, simply because you tell it to. Torben stepped forward. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. When you touched the king, what did you feel? Sonara opened her mouth to say nothing, because that was the safe answer, the answer that would let her walk out of this room and go back to her small, quiet, invisible life. But the safe answer was a lie, and something in Torben's face told her he already knew it. Heat, she said. Pressure, like something inside me was pouring out through my hands, and my wolf woke up. Torben exchanged a glance with Ottilie. Something passed between them that Sonara could not read but could feel, a shift in the room, like a door opening somewhere she could not see. Your wolf has been dormant, Ottilie said. It was not a question. Since my mate died. 2 years. And it woke when you touched the king. Sonara nodded slowly, a cold feeling spreading through her stomach. What does that mean? She asked, though she was not sure she wanted the answer. Ottilia's hands went still for the first time since she had entered the room. That alone frightened Sonara more than anything else that had happened today. It means, Torben said, that the king is requesting your presence in his chambers tomorrow morning. He wants to speak with you himself. The ground tilted beneath Sonara's feet. And if I refuse? Torben's expression softened, but only slightly. No one is forcing you, but I will tell you what I have not told anyone outside this room. He paused, and for the first time, the composure cracked. Something raw and frightened showed through, just for a moment. The king has weeks left, perhaps less. What you did today is the only thing that has given me hope in 7 months. He held her gaze. Please do not refuse. Sonara lay awake that night in her narrow cot in the servants' corridor and stared at the ceiling. Her wolf paced inside her, restless and alert, fully present for the first time in 2 years. The sensation was disorienting, like a limb waking after going numb. Pins and needles in her soul. She thought about Jorath, about the bond they had shared, warm and steady and certain, and the way it had shattered when he died. She had felt the exact moment it broke, had felt the tearing inside her chest like something physical being ripped free. Her wolf had howled once and gone silent. For 2 years, silence. And now this. A king she had never spoken to. A curse she did not understand. A wolf that had chosen, of all the moments in 2 years of grief, to wake up now. She pressed her palm to her chest and felt the faint, uncertain pulse of her wolf beneath her ribs. Why now? She whispered into the dark. Why him? Her wolf offered no answer. Just a low, steady pull towards something she was not ready to name. The king's private study smelled of leather and cold tea, and the particular brand of exhaustion that had seeped into the walls from months of occupation by a man who could not rest. Sonara stood just inside the doorway, her hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking, and waited. Caedmon Voss sat behind his desk. The morning light was unkind to him. It showed everything the throne hall's torchlight had been merciful enough to hide, the sharp angles of his face where muscle had wasted, the bruised hollows beneath his eyes, the faint tremor in his hands as he turned a page. He was still beautiful, devastatingly so, in the way that ruins are beautiful. Something magnificent in the process of being unmade. He did not look up when she entered, did not look up when Torben closed the door behind her. Did not look up for a full minute while Sonara stood there, her pulse beating hard enough to shake her vision. Sit, he said finally. His voice was quiet, rougher than she expected, like something that had been used too hard and rested too little. She sat in the chair across from his desk. The wood creaked. He turned another page. You are the widow, he said, still not looking up. Yes, Your Majesty. Fenholopak. Sonara's throat tightened. What remains of it? Which is just me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he set down the page and looked at her. The full weight of his gaze was something she had not been prepared for. Up close, his eyes were not simply gray. They were layered, pale at the edges and dark near the center, like smoke over steel. They held an intelligence that was almost aggressive in its focus, and beneath that, a weariness so deep it made her chest hurt. "You touched me yesterday," he said. "I did, Your Majesty. I am sorry." "Do not apologize. I am told it saved my life." Sonara did not know what to say to that. "My healers cannot explain what you did," Caedmon continued. "My beta cannot explain it. Ottilie tells me your wolf has been dormant for 2 years and chose the precise moment I was dying to wake up." He tilted his head slightly. "Can you explain it?" "No." "An honest answer," he said. "That is rare in this palace." Another silence. Sonara could feel her wolf pressing forward again, leaning toward him with that same desperate, pulling urgency. She pushed it down. "I have a proposition," Caedmon said. "One that I suspect you will find unreasonable. Most propositions from kings tend to be." Something shifted in his face, not quite amusement but a crack in the stone. He ignored the comment and pressed on. "The curse returns every night. It is worst between sundown and dawn, though it has recently begun breaking through during the day as well, as you witnessed. My healers have tried everything, and I do mean everything, to slow it. Yesterday, you accomplished in 30 seconds what 7 months of treatment could not." He folded his hands on the desk, and she could see the effort it cost him to keep them steady. "I am asking you to stay in the palace, close to me, through the nights." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. "You want me to sleep near you," Sonara said slowly. "I want you within proximity. There will be a separate bed in an adjacent alcove. The arrangement is purely medical." "Purely medical," Sonara repeated. "Yes? And what does the court think of a widow sleeping in the king's chambers for purely medical reasons? The court will not be told. As far as anyone outside this room is concerned, you have been reassigned to the royal dispensary on the upper floor. Night shift." Sonara studied him. Beneath the controlled mask, she could see the truth of what this was costing him. He was a proud man, an alpha king built for dominance and command, and he was asking a stranger for help. Not asking, nearly begging, though he would bite off his own tongue before he admitted it. "How long?" she asked. "Until we find a cure, or until the curse kills me, whichever comes first." The bluntness startled her. He said it the way someone might announce a change in the weather. Not with resignation, but with the flat practicality of a man who had already made his peace with the worst possible outcome. "You speak very casually about dying," Sonara said. "You would too, after 7 months of it." Her wolf surged again, hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Not toward the man, she told herself. Toward the wound. She was a healer. Her wolf was responding to suffering. That was all this was. "I will do it," she said. "But I have conditions." Caedmon's eyebrows rose. She suspected people did not often set conditions with the king. "A proper bed," she said. "Not a pallet, not a cot, not whatever thin excuse for a mattress your servants drag out for the help. An actual bed with an actual pillow." "Done. And I continue my work in the dispensary during the day. I will not sit idle." "Agreed. And no one gives me orders about what to wear, how to behave, or where to stand. I am not a courtier, and I do not curtsy well." The crack in his expression widened. For just a moment, something almost warm flickered behind those gray eyes. "Is that all?" he asked. "One more thing." Sonara met his gaze and held it. "If this does not work, if I cannot help you, I want your word that you will not punish me for failing." The warmth vanished. Something raw replaced it. "Why would I punish you for that?" he asked, and his voice had dropped to something low and rough and almost hurt. "Because I have learned," Sonara said quietly, that people in power do not always react well to disappointment. The silence that followed lasted long enough for her to hear the fire cracking and the wind pressing against the window glass. "You have my word," Caedmon said, "no matter what happens." That night, Sonara lay in the alcove bed that had been set up behind a wooden screen in the far corner of the king's chambers. True to his word, it was a real bed. Better than real. The mattress was thick, the sheets were soft, and the pillow was so absurdly comfortable she nearly laughed. On the other side of the screen, she could hear the king moving. The creak of his bed frame, the rustle of sheets, the controlled, deliberate breathing of a man trying to force his body to do something it had forgotten how to do. She lay still and listened. Minutes passed. His breathing changed, grew shallow and tight, and she heard a low sound that she recognized. Pain. Not the sharp kind that announces itself, but the slow, grinding kind that lives in the bones. Sonara closed her eyes and felt her wolf lean toward him through the dark, not with desire, but with something older and simpler. The instinct to ease suffering. The pull that had defined her life as a Luna before everything burned. She did not realize she was crying until the tears reached her jaw. 20 minutes later, his breathing evened out. The pain sounds stopped. The restless shifting went quiet. He was asleep. Sonara pressed her face into the absurdly comfortable pillow and let out a breath she had been holding since the throne hall. Her wolf settled, the pull easing into something warm and steady. In the morning, she would learn that he had slept 5 unbroken hours for the first time in 7 months, that the black veins had not appeared once during the night, that Torben had stood outside the door until dawn, listening, and had wept silently when he realized the king was still breathing. But for now, Sonara lay in the dark and listened to the king's sleep, and tried not to think about the fact that her wolf, dead for 2 years, was purring. A rhythm formed, though neither of them named it. Evenings, Sonara climbed the back staircase to the king's chambers after the palace had gone dark. She carried nothing with her except a change of clothes and whatever book she had borrowed from Attilia's shelf. She entered quietly, set her things on the small table beside the alcove bed, and said good evening. The king said good evening back. Sometimes he said it immediately, sometimes after a pause so long she thought he had not heard her, but he always said it. Then they existed in the same room without speaking, and eventually, they slept. It should have been strange. It was strange. In the beginning. Sonara lay behind the wooden screen and listened to a man she barely knew attempt to surrender his body to rest and felt like an intruder in someone else's most private struggle. But the strangeness wore thin faster than she expected. By the 4th night, the routine had smoothed into something almost domestic. By the 7th, she stopped gripping the edge of the mattress. Small things began to change. A second candle appeared on her table, taller than the first, positioned so the light fell perfectly on whatever page she was reading. She had not mentioned struggling with the dim light. She had not mentioned reading at all. "Thank you for the candle," she said one evening. Caedmon glanced up from the report he was reviewing at his desk. "Torben handles the household arrangements." Torben selected a beeswax candle and placed it at the exact angle for reading. The king's ears turned faintly red. He returned to his report without answering. Then the tea started. A cup of chamomile, already brewed and waiting beside the candle when she arrived. No explanation offered, no acknowledgement expected. The first night it appeared, Sonara wrapped her hands around the warm cup and felt something loosen in her chest that she had not realized was tight. During the days, their lives did not touch. He ruled. She ground herbs and mixed tinctures in the dispensary and treated the minor injuries and ailments of palace staff. They occupied different worlds separated by stone walls and centuries of rank. But in the evenings, the walls thinned. It started because Sonara could not tolerate silence the way he could. She was a talker. She had always been a talker. Jorath used to say she could hold a conversation with a stone wall and the wall would eventually respond. So she talked. Not about anything that mattered. She told him about the cook's assistant who had slipped on a wet floor and sprained both wrists simultaneously and then tried to insist he was fine while holding his hands at angles that no human wrist was designed to achieve. She told him about the time she had accidentally prescribed a laxative instead of a sleep tonic to a visiting dignitary, and the resulting diplomatic incident that Ottilie still refused to discuss. She did not know when the silence on his side of the screen shifted from tolerance to attention. But she noticed the absence of restless movement, noticed his breathing change from tight and controlled to something gradually looser as she spoke. He was listening. One morning, as she gathered her things to leave, he said without looking up from lacing his boots, "The dignitary. Which country?" Sonara froze. "I beg your pardon?" "The dignitary you poisoned with laxatives. Which country was he from?" She stared at him, her heart doing something unexpected. "I did not poison him. It was an honest mistake." "Which country?" "Valdenmarch." Caedmon made a sound. Low, brief, almost invisible. But she caught it. She had made the king laugh. Sonara carried that sound with her for the rest of the day, like a coin she kept turning over in her pocket. 2 weeks in, Ottilie summoned her to the lower study and delivered the news with the blunt efficiency that Sonara had come to expect from her. "The alcove is too far away." Sonara blinked. "Too far? I am 12 feet from his bed." 12 feet is enough distance for the curse to regain ground during the night. Torben has been monitoring. Ottilie spread a set of notes across the table. "The king's vitals improve significantly when you are in the room, but the effect weakens as the night progresses. The readings from the second half of each night show the blackening returning at the extremities. Fingers, toes, earlobes." Sonara felt cold spread through her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that proximity matters. The closer you are, the stronger the effect. The alcove was a starting point, not a solution." She paused. "The curse is a severance, Sonara. It is designed to split a shifter from his wolf until the wolf dies and the man follows. Your Luna wolf acts as a bridge. Where the curse tears the bond apart, your presence holds it together. But the bridge must be close enough to span the gap. You want me to move my bed closer. I want you to share his bed?" The words landed like a hammer blow. Sonara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That is not happening," she said. "Sonara." Ottilia's voice softened. "I understand the difficulty, but the data is clear. Physical closeness is the variable. We cannot replicate your effect with any tincture or charm. You are the treatment, and the treatment requires contact." Sonara's mind spun. She thought of Jorath, of the bed they had shared for 4 years, of the way his body had curved around hers in sleep, protective and familiar. She had not shared a bed with anyone since his death. The thought of lying beside another man, even for medical reasons, even without touching, felt like a betrayal so intimate it made her chest seize. "What does the king think?" Sonara asked. Ottilie hesitated. "He refused." "He refused?" "Quite firmly. Something about not subjecting you to further indignity." His words. Sonara sat with that for a moment. He had refused, not because he found the idea distasteful, but because he was trying to protect her from it. "Let me talk to him," she said. She found him in his study that evening, bent over correspondence with the careful focus of a man who was using concentration as a weapon against his own body. The tremor in his hands was worse tonight. She could see it from across the room. "Ottilie told me about the alcove," Sonara said. Caedmon did not look up. "And I told Ottilie no." "You told Ottilie no on my behalf, without asking me." His pen stopped. "You are under no obligation to do more than you are already doing," he said quietly. Sonara walked to his desk and sat in the chair across from him. She waited until he looked up. When he did, the weariness in his eyes was so profound it made her want to reach across the desk and press her hand to his face just to take some of it away. "I shared a bed with my husband for 4 years," she said. "He died, and I thought that part of my life was over. Maybe it is. But you are dying too, and I can do something about it. And I refuse to let you die because you were too polite to ask me to sleep 6 inches closer." Something moved behind his eyes. Not amusement this time. Something deeper, rawer, almost wounded. "I am not your husband," he said. "No," Sonara replied. "You are not. But you are my king, and you need help, and I am offering." The silence stretched between them. "Fine," Caedmon said at last, "but I stay on my side." "I would expect nothing less." That night the screen was removed, and Sonara lay in the king's bed for the first time. The mattress was enormous. The sheets smelled of him, cedar and iron and something warmer beneath. The heat of his body reached her from 2 feet away, and her wolf pressed forward so hard she had to clench her jaw to stay still. Neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. The wind moved against the glass. His hand found hers in the dark. Careful, tentative, asking permission through pressure alone. Sonara's heart slammed against her ribs. She closed her fingers around his and held on. He was asleep within minutes. Sonara lay beside him, their joined hands resting between them on the cool sheets, and tried to breathe around the ache in her chest that was no longer grief. It was something new, something terrifying. And her wolf was singing. The first week of sharing his bed nearly destroyed her composure. It was not the proximity. She could manage proximity. It was the intimacy of witnessing someone at their most unguarded. The way Caedmon's face changed in sleep, the hard lines of authority dissolving into something younger, something almost gentle. The way his fingers would tighten around hers when a bad dream passed through, a reflexive grip that communicated more than any words he had ever spoken to her while awake. She learned things about him that she suspected no one else knew, that he slept on his left side, that his breathing carried a slight catch at the base of each inhale, a remnant of an old injury that had healed wrong, that he talked in his sleep, not words exactly, but fragments. Half-formed sounds that sometimes sounded like names. She did not ask whose names they were. The blackening retreated further each night. Ottilie's reports confirmed it. The veins that had been visible along his forearms were fading. His appetite returned in cautious increments. The tremor in his hands was still present but less pronounced, and Torben reported that the king had managed a full shift for the first time in 3 months. But the nights were not without cost. On the 9th night of sharing the bed, Sonara woke to the sound of Caedmon's breathing going wrong. Not the quiet catch she had grown accustomed to, but something ragged and torn, the sound of lungs working against a weight they could not move. She turned toward him in the dark and saw the black veins crawling up his throat, pulsing faintly with a light that was not light at all, but the absence of it. She reached for him without thinking. Her hand pressed flat against his chest, right over his heart, and her wolf erupted with such force that the room seemed to tilt. Then she was somewhere else. The darkness was absolute. Not the darkness of night, which carries stars and sounds and the distant promise of dawn, but a thick, suffocating void that pressed against her eyes and ears and mouth like hands trying to force her underwater. The air was cold, not winter cold, but the cold of absence, of warmth being taken rather than simply missing. Sonara could not breathe. She gasped, and the darkness filled her lungs like liquid. Then she heard it, a sound that cracked her heart open. A wolf was howling. Not the strong, clear howl of a healthy animal, but a broken, ragged cry that came from somewhere deep below her, as though the creature was buried alive and screaming for help through layers of stone and earth. Sonara ran toward the sound. The ground beneath her feet was soft and yielding and wrong, like walking on something alive. The howling grew louder, then weaker, then louder again, a terrible rhythm of desperation and surrender alternating with each breath. She found him in a pit carved from the darkness itself, a massive wolf, silver gray with eyes that matched the king's, chained to the ground with bonds that were not metal, but vines of the same blackness that crawled through Caedmon's veins. The chains had grown into the wolf's body, burrowing beneath fur and skin, fusing with muscle and bone. The creature was being absorbed, consumed, swallowed by its own prison inch by inch. "Caedmon," she whispered, and the wolf's eyes rolled toward her. The recognition in them was devastating. He knew her. The chains pulsed and tightened. The wolf howled again, and this time the sound carried something she could translate through the bond she refused to name. Not just pain, shame. He did not want her to see this. Sonara reached for the nearest chain. The moment her fingers touched it, agony exploded up her arm, white hot and blinding, and she heard a voice that was not a voice. A whisper pressed directly into her mind like a blade sliding between her ribs. He earned this. He chose blood. The dead remember. She screamed and wrenched her hand back. The darkness surged. The wolf thrashed against the chains. And somewhere above or beyond or outside this impossible place, she felt Caedmon's heart stutter beneath her palm. Sonara woke gasping, wrenching upright in the dark. Her hand was still pressed to the king's chest. His heartbeat was steady again, the black veins receding, his face smooth with dreamless sleep. But her fingers were shaking, and when she pulled them away, she could still feel the echo of those chains beneath her skin. She knew now, the curse was not just attacking his body. It was devouring his wolf from the inside, and his wolf was letting it happen because he believed he deserved it. Something cold settled in her stomach. She looked down at the sleeping king and felt the full weight of what she had seen pressed down on her, like a hand on her chest. She could not fix this with proximity. She could not fix this with touch or tea or candles placed at the perfect reading angle. The curse was alive, and it was feeding on something deeper than magic. It was feeding on his guilt. And she had no idea how to fight that. In the morning, she made a mistake. She told him. The words came out before she could stop them, tumbling over each other in a rush of concern and fear that she could not contain. She told him about the darkness, the pit, the wolf in chains, the voice that said he earned this. Caedmon's face went blank. Not angry, not shocked, but utterly, terrifyingly empty, like a door slamming shut behind his eyes. "You were inside the curse," he said. "Yes." "You saw the wolf." "Yes." "Caedmon, the chains are growing into him, into you. If we do not do something soon—" "How did you get there?" The question was too calm. Sonara's stomach dropped. "I touched you. During one of the episodes, my wolf pulled me in somehow." He stood from the bed slowly, like a man trying not to shatter something fragile. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, and the morning light outlined the tension in his shoulders with cruel precision. "You will not sleep in this room again," he said. The words hit her like a blade. "What?" "The curse pulled you in. My curse. My chains, my darkness. If you go back there, if it takes hold of you—" He stopped. His hands were clenched at his sides. "You will not sleep in this room again. Caedmon, listen to me." "No." He turned, and the emptiness in his face had cracked. Beneath it was something desperate, something that looked like terror wearing the mask of authority. "I have watched this curse destroy me for 7 months. I will not watch it destroy you. It will not destroy me. I was there for seconds. I can learn to—" "You felt the chains." His voice dropped. "I saw it on your face when you woke. You felt them, and they hurt you." She could not deny it. Her hand still ached where she had touched them. "It does not matter," she said. "I am choosing to help you. And I am choosing to send you away." The finality in his voice was a wall she could not climb. Sonara stared at him, her wolf howling inside her with a grief that felt disproportionate, irrational, enormous. "You cannot do this alone," she said. "I have been doing it alone for 7 months. And it is killing you. Then it kills me." He held her gaze, and the resolve in it was absolute. "But it will not kill you. Not because of me. Get out." The last 2 words were quiet, almost gentle, and that made them worse than if he had shouted. Sonara gathered her things. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her book twice. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame, and looked back. He was standing at the window again, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. He did not turn around. She left. The first 3 days were manageable. Sonara told herself it was temporary, that Torben would intervene, that Otelia would present data and logic and force the king to see reason. She told herself the hollow ache in her chest was worry, not withdrawal, not the bond she refused to acknowledge clawing at her from the inside. By the 4th day, she stopped pretending. Her wolf, so recently alive, began to retreat again. Not the violent rupture of Jarath's death, but a slow, grinding withdrawal, like a tide pulling back from shore. She had felt her wolf sing. She had felt it reach for something and find an answer. And now it was being pulled back into the silence, and she could not stop it. The migraines came first, then the nausea, then a fatigue so deep that climbing a single flight of stairs left her gripping the railing with both hands. "You need to eat," Otelia told her on the 5th day. "I am eating." "You had 3 bites of bread and half a cup of broth." "I am not hungry." Otelia studied her with eyes that saw too much. "How is your wolf?" Sonara did not answer. She did not need to. Otelia could see it in her face, in the dullness of her skin, in the way her movements had gone careful and slow like a woman twice her age. On the 6th day, she heard that the king had collapsed during a private meeting. The blackening had returned with a vengeance, spreading further and faster than before, reaching his face for the first time. 3 healers were summoned. None could stop the progression. They stabilized him only when the episode passed on its own, leaving him gasping on the floor with black veins fading from his cheeks like bruises in reverse. Sonara heard this from a kitchen maid who had heard it from a guard, and each version of the story was worse than the last. She sat in the dispensary with her hands flat on the workbench and felt the bond she would not name screaming inside her. On the 7th day, Sonara was summoned to the east corridor to treat a guardsman who had dislocated his shoulder during a training exercise. She gathered her supplies, moving through the motions with the mechanical focus of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be fully present. She turned a corner and saw him. Caedmon was walking toward her from the opposite end of the corridor, flanked by Torben and 2 advisors. He looked worse than she had imagined. The hollows in his cheeks had deepened into shadows. His skin carried a grayish undertone that had not been there a week ago. He moved with the careful precision of a man conserving every remaining unit of strength. Their eyes met across 30 feet of stone hallway. The bond detonated. Sonara felt it like a physical blow, a wave of need and anguish and desperate recognition that nearly buckled her knees. Her wolf, fading and silent for days, flared one final time with everything it had left, reaching for him across the distance with a force that whited out her vision. She saw Caedmon falter, saw his hand shoot out to catch himself against the wall, saw Torben grab his arm. Then her legs gave out. The supplies scattered across the stone floor. She heard someone shout her name, heard boots on stone, felt the corridor tilt and spin and dissolve. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. She knew whose arms they were before her vision cleared, knew by the scent of cedar and iron, knew by the desperate tightness of the grip, knew by the ragged sound of her name torn from his throat like it was the only word he had left. Sonara. She opened her eyes. He was holding her, kneeling on the stone floor of the corridor, cradling her against his chest with both arms. The black veins were visible on his neck, creeping toward his jaw, but he did not seem to notice or care. His gray eyes were wide and raw and terrified in a way she had never seen from him before. "I am fine," she whispered. "You are not fine." His voice broke on the last word. "You are not fine, and it is my fault." Torben crouched beside them. "Your Majesty, we need to move her to the infirmary." Caedmon lifted her without waiting for assistance. He carried her the entire way, and Sonara, too weak to protest, pressed her face against his shoulder and felt the bond between them humming with pain and relief in equal measure. In the infirmary, he set her on the bed and did not let go of her hand. Ottilie arrived within minutes, took one look at both of them, and closed the door. "How long has she been like this?" Ottilie asked. "I did not know," Caedmon said, and the guilt in his voice was a living thing. "I did not know it was affecting her." Ottilie turned to Sonara. "Child, is your wolf going dormant again?" Sonara nodded. She was too tired to lie. Ottilie looked at the king, then at their joined hands, then back at the king. "Your Majesty," she said, "I need to tell you something, and you are not going to want to hear it." Caedmon's grip on Sonara's hand tightened. "The bond between you is not optional," Ottilie said. "It is not a side effect. It is not a coincidence. It is forming whether either of you consents, and the separation is accelerating your curse while simultaneously killing her wolf for the second time." Sonara felt the words land in Caedmon's body before she saw his reaction, a flinch that traveled through his hand into hers. "If you continue to keep her away," Ottilie continued, "the curse will take you within weeks, and the bond severance will take her shortly after." Caedmon was very still. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that by sending her away to protect her, I am killing her." Ottilie did not flinch. "Yes, that is exactly what I am telling you." The silence after Ottilie's words was long enough to hear the candle flame guttering on the bedside table. Caedmon released Sonara's hand. Not abruptly, not with the sharp withdrawal she had feared, but slowly, deliberately, the way a man sets down something he knows he must eventually pick back up. He stood from the chair beside her bed and walked to the window. The afternoon light cut across his face, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. "Leave us," he said to Ottilie. The healer studied him for a moment, then nodded and stepped out, pulling the door shut with a quiet click. The room settled into stillness. Sonara watched him from the bed, her body aching with exhaustion, her wolf barely stirring beneath her ribs. The bond between them had gone thin and strained and desperate, pulling taut like a thread about to snap. "You knew," she said. "About the bond?" He did not turn from the window. "I suspected from the first night." "And you said nothing." "What was I supposed to say?" His voice was rough, scraped raw. "That the curse killing me had decided to chain you to me as well? That by saving my life, you had signed away your own?" He pressed his forehead against the glass. "You lost one mate already. I was not going to sentence you to watching another one die." The word mate hung in the air between them. He had said it. Out loud, without qualification, without retreat. Sonara's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. "That was not your decision to make," she said. "It was the right decision." "It was not. You nearly killed us both." He flinched. "Look at me," Sonara said. He did not move. "Caedmon, look at me." He turned. The afternoon light showed everything, the black veins still faintly visible at his collar, the hollowed cheeks, the exhaustion carved so deep it had become a permanent feature. But his eyes were alive, burning with something so fierce and frightened and hungry that it stole her breath. "I am not fragile," she said. "I buried my husband, I buried my pack, I buried my wolf and lived 2 years in silence, and I survived all of it. Do not decide what I can bear." He crossed the room in 3 steps. He stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough that the bond surged between them like a current. His hands were shaking. "If I let you in," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and the curse takes me anyway, it will take you too. Do you understand that? If I die, you die." "Then do not die," Sonara replied. Something broke in his face, not composure, not control, but the wall behind all of it. The thing he had been building for 7 months to keep everyone out collapsed, and what was left was just a man, terrified and exhausted and achingly, desperately alone. "I dream about you," he said, "every night since you left. I reach for you in the dark and you are not there, and the curse rushes in to fill the space where you were. I can feel my wolf dying, and the only time it stops is when you are near me, and I sent you away because I thought it was the right thing, and it was the worst thing I have ever done." Sonara reached for him. Her hand found his jaw, her thumb resting against his cheek, and he leaned into her touch with a sound that was almost a groan, his eyes closing, his whole body curving toward her like a plant toward sunlight. "Then stop sending me away," she whispered. He kissed her. It was not graceful, not measured, not the controlled gesture of a king. It was desperate and shaking and tasted like salt, and his hands came up to cradle her face like she was the most valuable thing he had ever held. Sonara kissed him back with everything she had, with 2 years of silence and grief, and the terrifying new thing growing in the space where the silence used to be. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. His breathing was ragged, his hands still trembling where they held her face. "Stay," he said. One word, stripped of rank and command and authority, just a man asking. "I am not going anywhere," she answered. What followed felt inevitable. He held her close, and the bond between them deepened with every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of closeness. And when the bond finally sealed, not with violence but with a quiet, searing certainty, Sonara felt it lock into place in her chest like a key, turning in a door she had thought was permanently closed. Her wolf blazed to life. Not the flickering, uncertain presence of the past weeks, but a full, roaring flame that filled every hollow space inside her. And through the bond, she felt his wolf answer. Faint, chained, still struggling in the dark, but answering. They lay together afterward, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her, and for the first time in 7 months, the blackening did not return at all. His skin stayed clear, his breathing stayed deep, his heartbeat stayed steady beneath her ear. Sonara closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for a moment, that this might be enough. She fell asleep, listening to his heart. She woke in the pit. The darkness swallowed her whole. Sonara stood in the void, barefoot on the soft, wrong ground, and this time she was not afraid. She was furious. The cold pressed against her skin, invasive and hungry, and the voice came immediately, slithering into her mind like poison poured through a crack. "You cannot save him. He does not want to be saved. The dead remember. The debt is unpaid." "Show me," Sonara said aloud. Her voice did not echo. The darkness ate it, but she did not care. The bond pulsed in her chest, golden and warm, a thread leading down into the black, like a lifeline. She followed it. The pit opened beneath her feet. Not as a fall, but as a sinking, the ground yielding, pulling her down gently, almost tenderly, like the darkness was welcoming her home. She descended through layers of cold and silence until she reached the bottom. Caedmon was there, not the king, not the man who commanded armies and held a throne through force of will. Just a man, kneeling in the dark beside his dying wolf, his hands pressed against the creature's side, his head bowed. The wolf was worse than before. The chains of blackness had consumed its hind legs entirely, spreading upward through the ribs. The creature's breathing was shallow, each exhale a shudder. Its eyes were still open, still gray, still conscious, and the pain in them was unspeakable. "Kedman," Sonara said, dropping to her knees beside him. He looked at her, and the expression on his face stopped her cold. It was not despair, it was acceptance. "You should not be here," he said. "We have already established that you do not get to decide where I go." The ghost of a smile crossed his face, but it died before it could take hold. "I cannot break the chains," he said quietly. "I have tried. Every night for 7 months I have tried, and they only grow tighter. They are part of me now. They are not part of you. They are feeding on you. There is a difference." "Is there?" His gaze dropped to the wolf. "Sonara, I marched an army into the Dravensfeld. I burned a settlement to the ground because their alpha would not stop killing my people, and when it was over, I stood in the ashes and watched the survivors weep over their dead, and I knew that I had done this. I gave the order. I swung the sword. And people who had done nothing wrong, people who were not soldiers, people who were just trying to live, they died because of me." The curse pulsed around them, feeding on his words, drinking them in. The chains tightened, and the wolf whimpered. "There was a girl," he continued, and his voice cracked, 15 years old. She was trying to carry her younger brother out of the village. A beam collapsed, and I did not reach them in time. He swallowed hard. "An elder of the Dravensfeld, a woman named Marin, spoke the curse over me as she lay dying. A severance curse, to take from me what I had taken from her people. She said my wolf would rot inside me the way her home had rotted around her." Sonara felt his grief pour into her, crashing like a wave of black water, heavy and freezing and bottomless. She understood now why the chains were growing. Every memory he carried, every face he could not forget, every life he could not save, they were all fuel. The curse did not need to create his guilt. It only needed to amplify what was already there. "You believe you deserve this?" she said. "I know I deserve this." "No, you do not." He shook his head. "You did not see what I saw. And you did not see what I saw." Sonara's voice came out louder than she intended, sharpened by something that had been building inside her for 2 years. "You think you are the only person in this pit who has held a body and believed it was their fault?" Caedmon looked at her. "Jarath died because of me," she said, and the words tore open a wound she had kept sealed so tight she had almost forgotten it was there. "Raiders came for the Fenhollow pack, and I told him to negotiate. I told him diplomacy would work. I told him to go out and talk to them instead of fighting, because that is what I believed. And he trusted me. And they killed him before he finished his first sentence." The silence was absolute. Even the curse seemed to pause. "I watched him die because he followed my advice," Sonara whispered. "And then I watched our pack scatter because their Luna had gotten their alpha killed with her naive belief in words over action. I lost my mate, my pack, my wolf, my entire life, because I was wrong." Tears ran down her face. She did not wipe them away. "I spent 2 years believing I deserved the silence inside me, that losing my wolf was punishment for what I did, that I should have been smarter, braver, less trusting." She looked at the chained wolf, then back at Caedmon. "I carried that debt the same way you carry yours, and it nearly killed me just as surely as your curse is killing you." The chains pulsed, but slower now, uncertain. "You gave an order to protect your people," Sonara said, her voice steadying. "People died, and that is a horror you will carry forever. But the horror of it does not make you guilty. It makes you human. You did not choose to kill that girl. You chose to end a war that would have killed thousands more if you had done nothing. And the grief you feel for the people you could not save, that grief is not proof that you failed. It is proof that you cared." She reached down and placed her hand on the wolf's head. The creature flinched, then leaned into her touch. The bond carried a shift back to her. Not in the curse, not in the chains, but in him. A fracture in the wall of certainty he had built around his guilt. "I am letting my debt go," Sonara said. "Right now. Right here. I loved Jorath, and I will grieve him forever. But I am done paying for his death with my life. I am done believing I deserve to be punished." She looked at Caedmon with everything she had. "Let the debt go," she said. "Please. Not because you do not care about them. Not because their lives did not matter. But because you are allowed to live, and your wolf is allowed to live. And you have paid enough." The darkness pressed in. The voice returned, colder, angrier. "The dead remember. The debt is unpaid. He chose blood. He chose to protect his people," Sonara said to the darkness. "And the dead are not asking for payment. You are." The curse screamed. Caedmon's head lifted. His hand came down on top of hers where it rested on the wolf's head. She felt the moment the decision moved through him, not like a switch flipping, but like a bone resetting, agonizing and necessary. "I am sorry," he said. Not to the curse, not to the darkness, to the girl he could not save, to the brother she had been carrying, to every soul whose face he carried in the dark. "I am sorry I could not reach you in time. I am sorry it was not enough." He closed his eyes. "But I am putting this down now." The chains shattered. Not with a sound, but with a silence, a sudden, ringing absence of pressure that made Sonara gasp. The black vines crumbled, dissolving into ash that drifted upward and vanished. The wolf surged to its feet, and for one breathtaking moment it was enormous, silver gray, blazing with a light that filled the pit and drove the darkness back like a tide retreating from the shore. The wolf threw its head back and howled, and the sound was not grief. It was release. The darkness broke apart around them. The void crumbled. The cold withdrew. Sonara woke in his arms, in his bed, in the warm amber light of early dawn. Caedmon was awake beside her, tears streaming down his face, and he was laughing. Not loudly, not with joy exactly, but with the stunned, disbelieving relief of a man who had been drowning for 7 months and had finally broken the surface. He cupped her face in both hands and kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks, her mouth. "Thank you," he said against her lips. "Thank you. Thank you." Sonara pulled him close and held on. The curse did not vanish overnight. Healing never works that way, and Sonara would have been suspicious if it had. Caedmon still woke some nights with his hands clenched and his breathing sharp. The memories did not disappear simply because he had chosen to stop weaponizing them against himself. Grief is patient. It waits in corners. It resurfaces when you least expect it. But Sonara was there. Every time the darkness crept in at the edges, she was there, her hand on his chest, her wolf reaching for his, and together they pushed it back. Not by fighting it, by refusing to feed it. The blackening never returned. Ottilie confirmed it after 6 weeks of monitoring. The veins were clear, the wolf was strong, and the king had regained the weight and color and steadiness that the curse had stolen from him. Their bonding was announced to the court on a gray morning in late autumn. A widow from a dead pack as the Alpha King's mate. The whispers were immediate and relentless. Too low, too common, too broken. Caedmon addressed them once, in a voice that carried the full weight of his authority and not an ounce of apology. "She walked into my curse when every healer in this kingdom walked away. She held my wolf together with her bare hands. If anyone in this court believes they are more qualified, I invite them to try." No one accepted the invitation. Now, months later, Sonara woke slowly in the pale morning light. Caedmon was asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even, his face smooth and peaceful. One arm was draped over her waist. Her hand rested on his chest, right over his heart, exactly where she had placed it that first day in the throne hall when everything changed. His wolf hummed beneath her palm, strong and whole. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The light shifted from gray to gold. Sonara closed her eyes, pressed closer to the warmth of him, and let herself rest. They slept.